You can find on television the televangelists, and some of them preach the message that goes where if you surrender to the Lord and pray and turn your life over to Him, you will be blessed with prosperity and greater health and have no problems in your life. Now, this is true in a certain sense. Jesus does bring healing and blessing to us, but it's omitting a very important part of the gospel, which is what we hear today, namely the message of the cross. Jesus says, if you wish to be my disciple, you must deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow after me. In other words, he's saying, to follow me, you are going to experience difficulty, suffering, some of you even death. Things will not go your way. It will be like carrying a cross. And who is it that wouldn't want to say, yeah, sign me up for that. I want to have more suffering in my life by being a follower of Jesus. It's certainly not a popular message, and the temptation is to gloss over that part of the gospel so as to attract more people. St. Teresa of Avila, while she was riding in a cart behind a horse one time, the horse got spooked and the carriage went into the ditch and overturned, and she was badly hurt, and she spoke to the Lord in prayer and said, why did you allow this to happen, Lord? And he responded and said, that's the way I treat all my friends. And she said, well, it's no wonder you don't have very many of them. At least she had a sense of humor about it. The temptation is for us to go for the easy life and avoid suffering and difficulty and effort. But as we look more closely, we realize we are made for more. Everything can be going well on the surface, but we desire a deeper happiness. And we realize anything that is worthwhile demands effort and even pain at times. Thinking of those who practice for sports, it's difficult and painful to do the practice in order to become a good athlete. Or musicians, it requires many long hours of hard work and practicing so you can sit down and play a song off the music. Or even raising a family. There is much sacrifice demanded, but we do it out of love for our children. We also see that it really isn't possible to avoid suffering. Sooner or later it comes to us. And Jesus is there to give meaning to suffering. Suffering in itself is not a good thing, but he has made it valuable by suffering on the cross. If we say suffering has no purpose, then we're saying Jesus wasted his time on the cross, which isn't true. On the contrary, we cannot achieve glory without the cross. The Son of Man must first be rejected and made to suffer and be killed, and so on the third day be raised from the dead. The grain of wheat must die before it can bear fruit. Suffering is a fruit of sin, and death is the result of sin, even tracing back to original sin. And so in order for Jesus to overcome sin in the world, he chose to take the suffering on himself. He became man so that he could suffer, to be with us in our suffering, which is the literal definition of compassion, to suffer with someone. And he takes the penalty on himself and invites us to participate in this mystery. By offering our suffering, we can help bring salvation to souls. St. Paul writes, I make up in my own body the suffering lacking to Christ for the sake of his body, the church. So Christ's suffering is really a sign of his love for us. What mother or father, when seeing their child suffer from a disease or illness, doesn't say, I wish that I could suffer instead of my child? What if we went further, though, and our children committed a crime? Would we also be willing to take on the penalty and suffer the punishment for that crime? What if it weren't our children, but our neighbor or even our enemy? Would we be willing to suffer for a crime or sin that they committed? That shows the love of God for us, who, while we were sinners, died for us on the cross, and invites us to share in that kind of sacrificial love for the salvation of souls. There's a beautiful prayer when we pray and visit the sick that says, may all who suffer pain, illness, or disease realize they have been chosen to be saints and unite their suffering to that of Jesus on the cross for the salvation of the world.